Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. It feels like political conflict today is driven less by specific disagreements on policy and way more by these fundamental underlying worldviews. Understanding a concept called authoritarianism really helps explain the intense polarization we're all seeing around us.
So let's just dive in with a quote that says it all. Back in 2004, a voter named Marc J used this simple parenting metaphor to explain why he supported George W. Bush after 9/11. Now, he wasn't talking about tax policy, he was talking about a worldview. And honestly, this one sentence reveals more about our political divides than hours of debate ever could, because it gets right to a fundamental clash in how we think the world should work.
And that really is the core puzzle, isn't it? Are we a spanking nation or a timeout nation? Why does it feel like our political arguments aren't really debates over facts anymore, but more like a collision between two completely different worlds?
Well, here's the argument. The real divide isn't Democrat versus Republican in the old-school sense. It's this deep-seated psychological tension. It's between people who prioritize order, structure, and conformity, and people who prioritize independence, nuance, and personal autonomy. That whole smack 'em versus give 'em a timeout thing, that's the key that unlocks this whole idea.
Okay, so let's get a really clear definition of the main idea here. What are we actually talking about when we say authoritarianism in this specific context?
Right, and this is an absolutely crucial distinction. We are not talking about dictators or political systems. For what we're discussing here, authoritarianism is a personality trait. Think of it like a psychological worldview that acts as a lens. It shapes how some people see a very complex and, to them, dangerous world, and what they demand from their leaders to feel safe in it.
That's a totally fair question, right? I mean, how do you even measure something as abstract as a worldview? You can't just go around asking people, so, are you an authoritarian? The book's authors came up with a pretty brilliant and simple method.
They actually measure it by asking a simple set of questions about raising children. Take a look at these pairs on the screen. Now, most of us would probably say, yeah, all of these are good qualities. But here's the trick. By forcing a choice, the questions uncover your underlying priorities. Do you lean toward raising a child who is independent and curious, or one who is obedient and well-behaved? Your answer says a whole lot about your fundamental preference for either autonomy or order.
So you might be wondering, if this psychological trait has always been around, why does it feel so central to our politics right now? Well, two key things happened. Our political parties started to sort themselves along this exact divide, and certain events happened that activated this worldview on a massive scale.
Think about it. When people feel threatened, and that could be anything from the 9/11 attacks to worries about crime or even rapid social change, that underlying need for order just gets cranked way up. In those moments of perceived danger, even people who aren't highly authoritarian start to put security first, and this creates a huge opening for politicians who project strength and promise to restore order, no questions asked.
This chart just illustrates the point perfectly. When you ask people if military strength is the best way to ensure peace, just look at the difference. For people who are low in authoritarianism, only about 22% agree. But for those who are high in authoritarianism, that number more than doubles to 54%. The more you're wired to prioritize order, the more you favor forceful, decisive solutions over, messy diplomacy.
And at the same time, you had political strategists, especially in the Republican Party, who started to realize the power of these themes. It started way back in the 60s with law and order, continued through the culture wars, and then the war on terror really solidified it. The GOP increasingly appealed to voters with that high need for order. And over decades, this created what the authors call the Great Sorting, where our two parties don't just represent different policies anymore, they represent two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's use a simple metaphor to show how these different worldviews can make people look at the exact same event and see two completely different things.
All right, the scenario is simple. A group of protesters has shut down a major highway. It's all over the news. Everyone is talking about it.
So someone with a non-authoritarian worldview, someone who prioritizes autonomy and individual expression, they're going to see this through the first lens. They see the disruption, for sure, but they focus on the reason for the protest. To them, it's a valid, if inconvenient, exercise of a fundamental right to demand change. But someone with an authoritarian worldview sees the exact same event through a second, very different lens. For them, the specific issue being protested is secondary. The number one issue is the violation of rules, the disruption of order, and the potential for chaos. It's not a protest, it's a threat to public safety that needs to be controlled. Same event, Two totally different realities. Okay, so why does understanding this framework matter so much? Because it completely changes how we interpret the political world that's buzzing all around us.
And this is the crucial takeaway. When you see a political fight that just seems completely irrational, where both sides are just shouting past each other, it's probably not a debate about facts. It's a clash of worldviews. And that explains the intense emotion, right? Because what's at stake isn't just a policy, it's a fundamental sense of how the world should be and whether it feels safe or threatening.
And that really leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. If the policy details are just the surface-level symptoms of a much, much deeper conflict, what are we really fighting to protect? Is it our security or our freedom, our traditions or our ability to change?
The ideas we've been exploring today all come from the groundbreaking work of Marc J. Hetherington and Jonathan D. Weiler in their book, Authoritarianism and Polarization in American Politics.
We encourage you to read the full book or borrow it from your local library to explore these ideas in greater depth. For the full long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy systems-level analysis like this, please subscribe and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.